Kazuma Kiryu is one of the most beloved characters in all of gaming. After being the lead in the Yakuza series since the very beginning, it seems that he's ready to pass the torch on and get out of the lifestyle for good this time. To celebrate all the good times and all the karaoke, here's the history of Kazuma Kiryu. When Kiryu was young, his parents were murdered by a member of the Yakuza. He ended up in an orphanage and idolized Shintaro Kazama, the Yakuza who operated the place. Kazama was a lackey of the Tojo Clan, who had been in a long turf war with the Jingweon Mafia. He was part of a plan to take out two of its leaders at a Christmas party in 1980, but had a change of heart and tried to convince them to flee instead. Kiryu, misunderstanding the situation, tried to interrupt to save Kazama. In the chaos, a shootout ensued. Kazama killed a mafia boss and many died. In the years following, Kiryu's obsession with the Yakuza grew, and Kazama eventually allowed Kiryu and his pal from the orphanage, Akira Nishikiyama, to join the Dojima family. But of course, Kiryu had to pay his dues, and so he starts on the bottom rung of the ladder, roughing up people and collecting debts. Unfortunately, after roughing up one debtor in particular in an inconspicuous empty lot, Kiryu is hauled in front of the Dojima family lieutenants. Turns out, the man had been murdered. It's the first domino to fall in a scheme around an empty lot, which is the key to the Dojima family completing the Kamurocho revitalization project, a development project which is set to make them even more rich and powerful than they currently are. The Dojima family is at war with itself to lay claim to the lot, trying to dethrone its imprisoned captain Kazama, as well as the other families within the Tojo Clan and a local company, Tachibana Real Estate. The lieutenants want Kiryu to turn himself into the police to reduce the heat on the family, but Kiryu is determined to find the real killer instead, and won't allow the family to pin the blame on Kazama. He is expelled from the family and digs into intrigue surrounding the empty lot. Kiryu joins forces with Tachibana to hunt down the owner of the empty lot. And despite the Dojima family's best efforts, including his old friend Nishikiyama threatening to kill him, he succeeds. It turns out that Tachibana's sister, Makoto, owned the lot, but didn't know its significance. Tachibana had been working with Kazama to make sure that the Dojima family didn't get their hands on it, and to ensure his sister's safety. After seeing the lengths the Dojima family will go to get to Makoto, Nishikiyama decides to turn his back on the Dojima family and to reunite with Kiryu, and the two manage to save Makoto. The two family members who were behind the plot are turned into the police. Kiryu then decides to rejoin the Dojima family and continues his journey. It's during this time that Kiryu earns the title the Dragon of Dojima, which is represented by the ascending dragon tattoo on his back. It's not long before Kiryu and his brother-in-arms Nishikiyama find themselves in trouble again. Their friend from the orphanage, Yumi Sawamura, is kidnapped by Sohei Dojima, the patriarch of the family, and Nishikiyama kills him to save her. Nishikiyama's sister is sick, so Kiryu decides to take the blame and goes to prison for 10 years. But when he's released, the world as he knows it has gone upside down. Sera, the head of the Tojo Clan, is dead, and a now bloodthirsty Nishikiyama runs his own family. Yumi is missing, and all the Yakuza in town are warring over a missing 10 billion yen. Kiryu is framed for the attempted murder of Kazama, and thanks to the help of the police officer Makoto Date, escapes. At the center of it all is a young girl named Haruka Sawamura, who Kiryu takes under his wing, as all of Kamurocho's underworld is after her, believing she's the key to the missing money. It turns out Haruka is actually Yumi's daughter, and her father is a crooked and ambitious politician named Jingu, who left the family when a more beneficial marriage became available, laundered the money, and even put out a hit on his wife and child to cover his tracks. There's a lot of backstabbing and many die, including Kazama, who on his deathbed reveals that he murdered Kiryu's parents. In the final confrontation, Nishikiyama kills Jingu, and a bomb goes off which kills him and Yumi. Kiryu, having lost his mentor and his two closest childhood friends, takes on the role of the fourth chairman of the Tojo Clan, but retires almost immediately, deciding to start a new, peaceful life with Haruka as his adopted daughter. Just when he thought he was out, Kiryu gets pulled back into the Yakuza once again. After Kiryu's replacement, Terada, is killed, he has to step in to prevent the Tojo Clan and Omi Alliance from warring. But it's obviously not that simple. Daigo Dojima doesn't want to lead the family, and while the Omi Alliance 5th chairman is up for peace, his son Ryuji is not. Ryuji stages a coup but is interrupted by the police. Kiryu and the police officer, Kaoru Sayama, form an uneasy alliance. She'll help him stop the Omi, but he has to offer up information on the Tojo Clan, who might be responsible for her parents' disappearance. They discover that surviving members of the Kamurocho Christmas massacre are hell-bent on revenge. With the Omi Alliance and the Jingweon Mafia closing in on both sides, Kiryu enlists all the allies he can get to help, including well-known frenemy Majima Goro. And he needs it, as on the anniversary of the massacre, the remainder of the Jingweon have planted bombs around Tokyo, and Ryuji, lusting after power, invades with his men. Kiryu manages to disarm the bombs and quell the resistance, ultimately learning the true parentage of Ryuji and Sayama. It turns out Terada wasn't dead after all. He was also a survivor of the massacre, and then the Omi Alliance swoops in with a bomb threat. Terada is killed, but Ryuji and Kiryu choose to fight instead of fleeing. The bomb was a hoax, but Ryuji dies and Kiryu, heavily wounded, escapes with Sayama. With the war with the Omi Alliance hopefully behind him, Kiryu starts a new life as a manager of the Morning Glory orphanage in Okinawa, hoping to carry on the work that his adopted father Kazama did before him. To fill his place, he gets Majima to assist Daigo Dojima in his duties as chairman, but only 6 months into the role, the orphans are faced with eviction, as the local Yakuza family who owns the land want to turn it into a seaside resort. But the Ryudo patriarch, Nakahara, has a daughter who has gone missing and comes to Kiryu for help. Kiryu rescues her from a rival clan and a fast friendship is formed between him and the Ryudo family. It turns out that the rival clan were working with a defense minister who was working on a military base expansion bill and needed the orphanage's land to complete it. But then disaster strikes. Daigo and Nakahara attacked, and the deed to the orphanage goes missing in the chaos. With multiple suspects, it's up to Kiryu to track down the troublemakers, facing off against the Triads as well as the Yakuza family once led by Nishikiyama. The thief and would-be assassin turns out to be Kazama's younger brother, Joji, who works for the CIA. The CIA is running an operation to take out some arms smugglers, and the military base expansion bill is part of the scheme. Turns out that the arms smugglers were run by a rogue CIA agent, Richardson, and in an attempt to tie off loose ends, is ultimately killed by one of the Yakuza he was trying to kill. At the end of Yakuza 3, Kiryu is stabbed by Go Hamazaki, who, after the destruction of his family, blamed Kiryu, who was only trying to convince him that it wasn't too late to turn over a new leaf. Luckily, Kiryu survives, and he and Haruka rebuild the orphanage. And wouldn't you know it, it's not long before their peace is broken when an escaped prisoner and Majima's blood brother, Seijima, washes up on the beach. After setting him on his way, someone else washes up from prison, only this time it's Hamazaki. Yes, the guy who almost fatally stabbed Kiryu. Kiryu, truly a man of honor who believes in redemption, nurses Hamazaki back to health, and learns that trouble is afoot once again for the Tojo Clan. People related to the hit Seijima committed back in the 80s are dying, and that the 10 billion yen stolen by Jingu was actually part of a police scheme which would destroy the Tojo Clan, and allow the Ueno Seiwa clan to take over. After much double-crossing, fighting, and a fake death, those responsible are exposed in the papers by Kiryu's longtime friend Date. After the mess is cleaned up, Seijima takes up the role of patriarch of his own family as part of the Tojo Clan.
Yoshi. Iko.
Kiryu, feeling that everything is in order, returns to the Morning Glory orphanage, for what he hopes is for good. And, of course, it's not. Haruka has been scouted to become an idol, and fearing scandal due to Kiryu's past, he takes on a new life as a taxi driver in Fukuoka, sending money back to the kids. Daigo Dojima, on a visit to Fukuoka, tells Kiryu that the patriarch of the Omi Alliance is dying, and the truce between the Omi and the Tojo Clan is at risk. Daigo then goes missing, and Kiryu, as one of the last people to see him, is dragged into the situation to track him down. Amidst the chaos, including Majima faking his death, the murder of Majima's ex-wife, who is Haruka's agent, and much, much more. Hey, I'm just trying to keep this about Kiryu. Kiryu finds out that Haruka's idol concert is going to be a target, and all hell breaks loose. Turns out that the patriarch of the Omi Alliance faked his death and introduced himself as a police officer to meddle in everyone's affairs. His son, Aizawa, wanted to gain his own power without being left the Omi Alliance from his father. Kiryu manages to defeat him, and Haruka decides to cut her idol career short and instead leaves with Kiryu. After recovering from his fight with Aizawa, Kiryu gladly heads back to prison for what he thinks will be a short stint before his peaceful retirement. Well, prison goes okay, but in his absence, the criminal underworld of Kamurocho starts to tear itself apart to keep the secret of Onomichi, which turns out to be a battleship. His pals, Seijima, Dojima and Majima, have been framed for arson and imprisoned. Haruka is in a coma after being hit by a car, leaving Kiryu to take care of her infant son, Haruto. Kiryu learns that Haruto's father is the heir to the Sayo Triad, which leaves the baby's life in danger. Kiryu confronts the mastermind behind the scheme and manages to save Haruka and Haruto, but gets shot again. Realizing that they'll never truly be safe as long as he's around, he promises to keep the secret about everything he's learned if Daigo is freed from prison, Haruka and her son are kept safe, and Kiryu is declared dead. Before he leaves for good, he encourages Daigo to follow the path of peace and gets one last look at the orphanage and his family. I'm not going to spoil too much here as the game just came out, but Like a Dragon Gaiden follows Kiryu, now going by the name Joryu, as he works with the Daidoji doing odd jobs. One important job goes very wrong, and it's clear that not everyone thinks that the Dragon of Dojima is dead, and some shadowy figures are working to provoke him out of hiding. Kiryu also appears in Yakuza Like a Dragon as a bodyguard and mentor figure to new Like a Dragon protagonist Ichiban Kasuga, and while he doesn't join Kasuga, he does help him out and eventually gives him his approval. A nice little passing of the torch moment. So there we have it, the history of Kazuma Kiryu. Now I know, a lot of story beats got left out because the Like a Dragon games are dense. Like a Dragon Gaiden is a great introduction to the Dragon of Dojima, but Kiryu's saga is well worth playing all the way through, especially to prep for Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. For more on Like a Dragon, make sure to keep your eyes peeled to GameSpot.